Calling to order this hearing or roundtable. This is what we call a public roundtable of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. Today is Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. The time is 10:26 in the morning, and this roundtable is being conducted virtually. It is accessible live via the Zoom video conference broadcast platform. It's also accessible live on the chairman's website, which is www.chairmanmendelson.com/live. The hearing is being recorded and will be available for public viewing on the council's website, which is www.dccouncil.us. The subject of this morning's hearing or roundtable is PR 24-380, entitled The Comprehensive Plan, Future Land Use Map and Generalized Policy Map Approval Resolution of 2021. This legislation was submitted by the mayor on October 1st of this year for consideration by the council. The stated purpose of this resolution, PR 24-380, is to approve the updated District of Columbia Future Land Use Map and Generalized Policy Map transmitted by the mayor. That is transmitted on April 1st, on October 1st, transmitted by the mayor on October 1st. Bill 24-1, the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Act of 2021, was adopted by the council on May 18th of this year. It was reviewed and approved by the National Capital Planning Commission on July 1st, 2021. The legislation completed its congressional review period and became law on September 24th, 2021. Pursuant to that act, the mayor must transmit final maps reflecting the council's amendments contained in that act, and the council must hold a public hearing to determine if the maps conform to the act that was adopted earlier this year. And the council must hold a public hearing. I think I already said this, and the council must hold a public hearing to determine if the maps conform to that act and adopt the maps by resolution. The purpose of this hearing is to determine if the maps reflect the council's amendments. This hearing is not an opportunity to request changes to the maps, as that is not possible with this resolution. The record in this matter will be open for a little less than 2 weeks. That is, the record will close at 5 p.m. on November 15th, 2021. Again, the record will close on Monday, November 15th, 2021 at 5 p.m. I want to apologize that this hearing, a roundtable, started late. I knew I had another event this morning and it conflicted, and so I apologize for the delay. According to the witness list, there are 3 witnesses before we get to the Director of the Office of Planning, and I will call on them now. Chris Williams, who's with the DC Grassroots Planning Coalition, William Jordan, and Renee Bowser, who's an ANC commissioner for 4D02. I'm told that Commissioner Bowser is not here. Mr. Williams, you would be first. Please begin. There's a clock. The clock is set for 3 minutes. If you go over, I won't cut you off right away, but if you go significantly over, I'll ask you to end. And then good morning. It's nice to see you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman Mendelson and the council. My name is Chris Williams. I'm a member of the DC Grassroots Planning Coalition, and so is Renee Bowser. The Zoning Commission Chair, Anthony Hood, urged the council to approve the comprehensive plan because developments were waiting on the new maps before moving forward with their development projects. With the finalization of the comp plan and these new maps, the council has signaled to the Zoning Commission that the process can proceed. However, there is a new key provision in the comp plan that requires a racial equity lens be applied to zoning decisions. And the Office of Planning and Office of Zoning have admitted that they have not yet implemented this policy nor created the tools necessary to do so. Therefore, in approving these maps, we urge you to send a strong message to the Zoning Commission that these maps must be implemented for the purposes of zoning changes without implementation of the racial equity lens. This is critical to communities like like Berry Farm and Park Morton, where hundreds of Black residents are being displaced. With the remainder of my time, I would also like to state that I believe the DC Council has very limited knowledge about what implications of what it's going to do in approving this resolution. As you may be aware, the Zoning Commission may, on its own motion or at the request of the applicant, petitioner, or affected ANC, determine the designation of cases that is brought before it as a contested case or a rulemaking case. The map allows for map amendments to take place without much public input or ability to affect the outcome. Without doubt, DC Council is greenlighting yet another phase of gentrification and Black displacement for the next 10 to 15 years. What we are asking is that the map amendment process should allow for there to be contested cases, because there can be impacts from zoning changes based on use changes and or intensity of use and density changes. In other words, what we could see is an effort to simply make a map amendment, make it a rulemaking case, and get around all public input. If the council is serious about racial equity, it should consider what the Zoning Commission must do with respect to their racial equity lens that they're supposed to have implemented. And they also must consider the processes by which these developments can go up in communities, particularly in Southwest. As you know, I am a resident and longtime champion of Southwest, where we continue to experience more of the same. In approving this, this is essentially what the DC Council would be allowing, more of the same.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Jordan, and good morning, and it's good to see you.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine.
I want to give my give my testimony, particularly from my perspective as a resident of Ward 1. I wanted to start by reading something from the Racial Equity Impact Assessment made for the comp plan in reference to the future land use map. This section notes that the future land use map, FLUM, expresses the desired intensity and mix of uses, but omits who desires these intensities and uses. The framework element explicitly calls for communities of color and those most impacted by structural racism to be meaningfully involved in the creation and implementation of institutional policies and practices. However, the land use element does not actively encourage community participation in innovative ways, explicitly mentioning Black communities and other communities of colors, or offer general guidance on methods to encourage community participation. So that's from the rear. So I wanted to say that I tried to review the maps just following the links. I found that the maps that came up were so blurry, I really could barely read them and make any kind of assessment. So I know that someone such as me who gets into this stuff can't follow what's going on. I know communities at large will have a even harder time. Well, I'm going to go to Ward 1. Ward 1, which is already one of the densest communities, wards in the city, it was all about upflumming, but the upflumming was based on the project 965 Florida Avenue, and how it is supposedly created more affordable housing and public-private partnerships. But this committee itself looked at that project and said it was mishandled by DMPED. It talked about how DMPED did not follow the professional appraiser, did not use the land use pricing to reduce environmental costs, failed to modify the deal to enable the district to share in upside profits should the development be awarded higher density. And of course, the project was awarded higher density and the city did not benefit. And we know today that the units that were created, the family size units, you know how much they rent for? Over $6,000 per month. The units that are affordable are smaller than what families need, particularly in Ward 1 and those who have been displaced. And the units that are not affordable are more expensive than the vouchers that public housing and other residents would use to be in the building. So I will end by saying, you're drawing lines in this map. The consequences of those maps are the effect of a new modern redlining. And that's what this council is doing. And I urge the council to look closely and to actually use a racial equity lens in moving forward. And as Chris Williams said, you have to take this seriously. This is not just a game of drawing maps. You are affecting lives, and particularly those of Black residents, Black families in this city. And you basically remove probably 20,000, 30,000 Black families from Ward 1 in the last 15 years because of these types of policies. So it's not just lines, these lines have meaning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Help me understand, how do the maps redline?
So the maps redline because upflumming encourages the types of developments that exclude Black families from the upside participation in the development. And that was the purpose of redlining. Redlining did not just segregate, but what redlining did is prevent Black families in the past from getting the wealth, income, and credit to develop and fully participate in American society. When
So
you
how do the
upflum
maps,
these,
how do the maps interfere with generating
how they interfere with what?
generating wealth?
Because the only projects that you end up with are rentals, right?
The maps, no, the maps
Yeah.
don't distinguish between
Yes, they
rental and
do.
ownership.
Yes, it does. If you, so this is why a racial equity lens is important. You have to look at what are the results and outcomes of these policies. These policies, when you upflung and you build these large buildings, especially in Ward 1, you get large rental buildings. You don't get home ownership opportunities because
Well, excuse me, but you could get a large a multifamily condominium. Those do exist.
yes, but that's fantasy, right? Again, racial equity says, go back, look at what's really happening, how people are really being impacted by policies. Then make your decision. Don't just go by.
Mr. Jordan, I'm having some difficulty understanding. I used to live at McLean Gardens, which is 720 units. It's apartment buildings and it's condominium. So that's ownership.
Yes.
The map doesn't specify ownership or rental. It's really the market or the developer who chooses between rental or ownership. But how are we to achieve 36,000 more units in the city to address the housing shortage if we don't allow for multifamily buildings?
So let's go back. The racial equity lens says we have to look at how our policies impact specifically impacted populations, right? And it says to go back and look at and analyze what is really going on, what's happening, not what we would like to happen, not what we think can happen, not what theoretically. So if you go to Ward 1 and you start to look at all the buildings that have been developed and you do an analysis, how many are rental? How many are for sale? Of the ones that are for sale, how many of those units are affordable to the typical average Black
I don't think you're
family?
answering my question. I don't really want to cut you off, but my question was, how do we generate 36,000 new units in the city to meet the shortage of housing?
The upflumming does not necessarily help you achieve that goal, right? So for instance, so let's start. If we're assuming that the goal is legitimate, so I haven't come up with the fact that the goal is even legitimate, but even assuming that the goal is legitimate because it's policy, right? Then we have to look at, if you create upflumming, which is what it is in this case for more density, right? We encourage a certain type of development by doing that. That type of development is producing units, but those units don't have the positive impact on the groups who are experiencing institutional and structural racism. In fact, it is displacing those groups from the ward. That has been what's happened.
All right,
And
you still
so-
haven't answered the question. How do we get 36,000 more units? You
That's-
say you're not sure you agree. Do you agree that there's a housing shortage in the city?
Only there's a shortage of certain types of housing in the city. So see, this is.
I guess that's correct.
Right.
I'm
And
not
so
sure.
is this,
But why is that meaningful? There's a shortage.
because it matters, because that's what the whole point of the racial equity lens. You can't just take a broad view. It's saying drill down and seeing how these elements impact different populations. You can't do, you don't satisfy the need simply by looking at the overall number, right? You have to break that number, what they use, and say disaggregate the numbers and disaggregate the impacts, right? So you have to take a greater responsibility. So even if I agree with the 36,000 new units, that's not sufficient. And so in changing the maps simply based on 36,000 new units is not sufficient job. And that's why you end up with the effectively modern day redlining.
So let me ask you just one other question, then I'll turn to Mr. Williams. You said the maps are blurry. So this was when you went online to the council website or online to the Office of Planning website?
When I went to follow the link from the legislation, and then I went to the one on the Office of Planning, the interactive one, but then trying to match the interactive one with the bill was very complicated. It wasn't easy to do a one-for-one because I wasn't sure that the two applied or they matched, if you understand what I'm saying. That would have taken another week of analyzing to figure it out.
I'm not sure you there. What's important to me is that you're able to look at the maps, whether it's on the OP website or whether it's on the council website, to be able to judge whether the maps accurately reflect what the council approved.
Yeah.
They were blurry. I asked you where you got them, how you accessed the maps.
Right.
What you said was a link through the council's website?
Correct. Through LIMS.
I'm sorry, say that again, that last part.
Through LIMS, the attachments that were as part of the introduction. So when I go to LIMS, and then I clicked on it, and then it has the introduction, then I click on the introduction, and in the introduction, they include PDFs of the maps.
Okay, so what happened when you went to the Office of Planning website? Were you
So
unable
when I
to
went,
maps that we have?
so when I went to the Office of Planning website, the map I found was the interactive map, where you move the little slide back and forth to look at the changes.
Yes.
But I wasn't clear that what I was looking at applied to the text of the bill. It wasn't obvious because that map is from before, even before we got these amended changes. That map was related to, I guess, even a year ago. So I couldn't tell whether this map, their map incorporated the actual text of the bill. In fact, I suspect that it didn't in one of the ones that I was looking at, because it didn't mention, there was a number, I think it's 9938.1 in the text, but 9938.2 is what showed on the map. And I couldn't figure out or didn't have time to figure out whether it all lined up or not.
Okay, well, I'm hopeful that Andrew Trueblood is listening, and I'm hopeful that you will continue to follow the hearing, which I don't think will be going on that much longer, so that we'll get an answer where you can access the map. When you went to LIMS, you got a PDF. Were you able to enlarge it, or was it?
That's when it blurred. So by the time I got it large enough to be able to distinguish street lines and things of that nature, it was a blur, and I definitely couldn't read the text that's associated with the legend of the map, which is really what I wanted to do as well, to see whether that text changed.
Okay, well, we will work on seeing if we can get this to be more legible. Let me turn to Mr. Williams. Actually, for both of you, I don't have a copy of your statements. And it's not very helpful for the record or for my reviewing this hearing if I don't have a copy of your statement. So if you would,
Well, I can certainly get you a copy, but what I will say is that we have so many crises after crisis in Southwest having to come before various committees. We have the redistricting Ward 6 hearing today as well. We have the issues at Capitol Park Plaza in Twins, where we've had to retain an attorney. You all have given us so many struggles to fight that writing up my testimony, frankly, is the least of my concern at this point, because we are fighting for our lives in Southwest. And I really would like for the DC Council to understand the kind of struggle and fight that we're in.
so are you asking that we just stop doing business, or what?
I'm asking for consideration. We're tired of fighting on every front in Southwest, and the corruption that is widespread. As you know, the major scandal coming out of the Housing Authority investigation, helping our residents in public housing seek legal representation with respect to the redevelopment, not to mention all the public housing disrepair issues. So when you ask for a text of our statement, I find that to be quite insensitive, because you all know the kind of barriers that you are putting up in Southwest, and you all understand the racial inequity that is rampant in Southwest
Sir,
and other neighborhoods.
Sir, you know, it's not my desire or my choice that there be a scandal at the Housing Authority, or that they're not keeping up with maintenance, two examples you gave. And I'd be happy if there was fewer issues for all of us. It doesn't change the fact that to have a better impact, it helps if the statement is in writing. You're not punished for not having your statement in writing. It's not as effective. So, Mr. Williams, you want us to send a strong message with regard to the rezoning process and its consideration through an equity lens. How do we send that strong message? How? Not what does it say, but how do we send it? This is a resolution. Vote yes or no on.
Mm-hmm. So just as the DC Council asked or mandated the Zoning Commission to include a racial equity lens, there needs to be more clarification about the timing of the implementation of that lens, because of course we know developments are proceeding before the Zoning Commission. Yet we see that the city, particularly Dr. Hewitt's office, have yet to implement what the REACH Act called for, and the Zoning Commission has yet to develop their racial equity tool. So the ask for DC Council is in some way to signal, either through legislation or otherwise, that it is your full intent in passing the comprehensive plan that the Zoning Commission understand that this tool is necessary to proceed further.
Thank you. My other question is, actually, it's not so much a question. You did say with regard to map cases that if they're not contested, the zoning commission will get around all public input. I did write that down. You said they will get around all public input. Now, a contested case, a contested case has to have adverse parties at interest. So that doesn't mean being interested in, it means being affected by, directly affected, like financially affected, and they have to be adverse parties. That's a contested case. And that's generally not the case with a map case where, which is like a text case, where it could be a whole block, it could be several squares, city squares. But there is a requirement that there has to be notice, a public hearing, an opportunity for public comment, then it has to be published in the register, and there's an opportunity to comment again to the register. So I'm not quite following how you could conclude that that gets around all public input.
Okay, I will read part of what I mentioned, and I should say I read directly from the law. So this is section 201.9, that the zoning commission may on its own motion or at the request of the applicant, petitioner, or affected ANC determine the designation of a case such as a contested case or a rulemaking case. What does that mean? And so let's clarify. So if it's a contested case, then obviously, as you state, there is a greater opportunity for public involvement wherein there is an injury or
No, I
some
didn't say
way.
that. I didn't say there's an opportunity for greater involvement. There's a hearing in either case. And in
But what,
fact, rulemaking, there has to be, the proposed rule has to be published in the register with an opportunity to comment. And that's not the case with a contested, that's not the situation with a contested case.
but ultimately, and this is the broader point that I'm making, ultimately, it is up to the zoning commission. So you all are hell
Up to the
bent
zoning commission what?
to make the designation, either as
Whether
a
it's
rulemaking
contested.
case or a contested case.
Okay, but your point, Mr. Williams, and I don't want to belabor this, is that a rulemaking case, quote, gets around all public input, unquote.
Because, as you state, with the contested case, those who are affected by the decision can then seek relief. But with a rulemaking case, essentially the public is cut out once the zoning commission has made that designation. And to
How are
my
they cut
other
out?
point, may I finish?
But the public is able to comment, and they're able to comment both at a hearing and through a rulemaking process.
But again, it relates to my other point, which is that the zoning commission has yet to implement the racial equity lens that is called for in the comprehensive plan. And so when
Okay.
they're making the decision on designation without a racial equity lens, we know that generally they're going to default to the rulemaking case.
All right, that doesn't, I don't remember that, I don't recall, in fact, I'm reasonably certain that in the council requiring that the zoning commission adopt a racial equity lens, we didn't say only for contested cases.
I'm not arguing that. What I'm
Okay, so
arguing,
it should apply for rulemakings as well. You said, Mr. Williams, quote, rulemaking gets around all public input, unquote, and that's factually not correct. There will not only be a public hearing with a rulemaking, but there will be an opportunity to comment on the rulemaking when it's published as a proposal in the register. There are two opportunities to comment on a rulemaking. So it is false to say that a rulemaking, quote, gets around all public input, unquote. And that has nothing to do with the racial equity impact analysis, because that's required. Now, whether they follow the law, I don't know, and I'm not going to assume that they won't follow the law. But the impact analysis is not excluded because it's a rulemaking. But that wasn't your point anyway.
that was my point anyway. My point, Chairman Mendelson, is that what this will allow for them to do is to take that map that you all pass and say, notwithstanding this racial equity tool that we've not yet implemented, we are going to base our decisions on past practices. And past practices are that these type of map amendments are rule-making cases.
You're either not hearing me or you're making assumptions that are not correct. Let me turn to Councilmember Gray if you have any questions.
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm listening very carefully, so I don't have any questions of this witness at all.
Okay. I want to thank each of you, Mr. Jordan and Mr. Williams. And again, if you could submit a written statement, that would be helpful to us. Thank you, each of you. I'm going to turn to the Office of Planning. I thought it was going to be the Director, Andrew Trueblood, but I'm told it might be the Deputy Director, Anita Kozart.
Good morning, Chairman.
Come on, give me just a.
Sure.
Ms. Kozart, good morning. Sorry to make you wait. When you're ready.
Good morning. No problem. Glad to be here. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Gray, staff, and of the Committee of the Whole. I'm Anita Kozart. I'm the Deputy Director for Community Planning and Design at the DC Office of Planning. And today I'm pleased to testify on proposed resolution 2480, the Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Map and Generalized Policy Map Approval Resolution of 2021, a resolution which would approve final maps reflecting the changes required under the recently enacted Comprehensive Plan Amendment Act of 2021. When the council voted to approve the latest comp plan update, it directed the mayor to make changes to the future land use map and the generalized policy map that are consistent with Section 2B of the Act. The council's direction in this regard is consistent with the council direction in past comp plan amendment cycles. The council further required the mayor to submit revised maps reflecting these changes for approval by resolution. In fulfillment of this requirement, the maps accompanying the proposed resolution reflect the future land use and policy designations approved by the council. As mentioned in the notice for today's hearing, the proposed resolution is not a vehicle for map changes not already approved in the Act. Nevertheless, the resolution is important because it marks the final council action in the comp plan update. And with this approval, we can turn our attention fully to comprehensive plan implementation. I appreciate the speed with which the committee has scheduled this hearing and the opportunity to testify before you today. I urge the resolution's prompt approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Kozart. I do have several questions. First, can you describe or discuss the process that your office used to ensure that the changes that the council adopted were made correctly and accurately?
Sure. So what we did is we took the section 2B of the Act and went through all of the changes that were listed in the text. And we worked with our GIS and cartography unit to verify that the changes were done and completed. We went through a process as a team to look through those maps and verify that information. And so that was the general process that we used to make sure that there was congruence between the two.
Did I hear you say, is it fair to characterize it as a check and double check?
Yes, that is a great and succinct way to characterize.
Have you since then gotten any feedback from the public or council members that there are any concerns that they had with accuracy?
We have not.
I think this is sort of implicit in what I just asked, but I'll ask it anyway. More specifically, agencies such as the Zoning Commission or the National Capital Planning Commission, any feedback from them with regard to the accuracy of the maps?
We did not, certainly with the National Capital Planning Commission, during the process before the approval of the council approved the document, we had lots of coordination with them. Since it was adopted and we shared the maps, we have not received any feedback regarding the accuracy of them.
I hope you were listening when the two previous witnesses testified. One of them said that they had difficulty reading the map that the council published. We published it as a, let me see, a link from the legislation to the attachments, which is what we received from the mayor when the resolution was introduced. We're going to try to fix that. It might be difficult because I believe that the attachments we received were reduced in size. If one goes to the Office of Planning website, Mr. Jordan testified that there's an interactive map there. Does that reflect the changes?
Yes, the interactive map reflects the changes.
So just to be sure that I'm clear and the record's clear, following the council's adoption of the comprehensive plan, the Office of Planning made changes to the interactive map to reflect what the council adopted.
That's correct.
Okay, so if anybody asks, I can say to them, you can go to the OP website.
That's correct.
Is op.dc.gov and get the look at the map there, which is probably more user-friendly than anything that we can do on our legislative information management system. And they can see the correct map there.
Just to amendment, the website is planning.dc.gov. That said, we also can provide to the council, as well as anyone who wants them, paper copies of the maps. And we'd be happy to do that for Mr. Jordan or others who would like to have them.
And if they reach out to the Office of Planning, they can get a paper copy.
Absolutely.
Do you want to repeat that web address?
Planning.dc.gov.
Okay, thank you. One last question. Once approved, when will the final maps and text of the plan be published?
We anticipate being able to publish a text of the document in January 2022. We are aspiring to do that. If we can expedite it more quickly and have it ready in December, we will. But as of now, our work plan kind of shows us having printed copies ready to share with the council and others in January. And I'll just add the maps, we can print the maps right now for folks.
Thank you. Let me turn to my colleague, Councilmember Gray. Do you have any questions?
I do not, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I appreciate the testimony that's been provided by the representative for the Office of Planning.
Thank you. Let me check with staff. Hold on a second. Ms. Cozart, I do not have any other questions for you. Thank you for your work on this and for your testimony.
Thank you.
So the record is open until close of business. That's 5 PM on November 15th. I am not asking for anything else from the Office of Planning. Did ask for copies of the statements from the two other witnesses. I think that does it.
We're gonna pause for a moment. All the witnesses are all waiting here for next hearing.
Okay, I was just told that, no, I'm looking at staff. I'm gonna have a public conversation with staff. I'm gonna adjourn this hearing.
Adjourn it. I'm gonna pause the recording and YouTube. All the witnesses are all waiting here for next hearing. Then we'll start back up.
Okay, the witnesses for the next, we have a hearing following this. The witnesses for the next hearing are apparently in the waiting room. And so there'll be a slight, I guess, pause in the recording, but we will proceed. We didn't need to go through all that at this hearing or roundtable, but we did. So I'm going to adjourn this hearing in a moment. There'll be a slight break, not very long, and then we will start up our next hearing, which is on namings of streets and so forth. Again, thank you, Ms. Cozart. Thank you to the other witnesses. And this hearing or roundtable is at 11 a.m. is adjourned.